Do we really control our own destiny? Are the choices we make truly our own, or is there someone, something else behind the scenes subtly directing us toward a fate that's already set in stone? Who are you? What will you decide? This is Behind the Song with Vandarth. The Architect is a song with several layers. On the surface, it kind of sounds like your typical rebellious rock song about resisting control. But on closer inspection, the lyrics are actually coming from pop culture. The song's actually inspired by a movie, one you're probably familiar with. Matrix Reloaded. It's the second entry in the Matrix series. But aside from an amazing, expensive highway scene, the film was met with disappointing reviews when it released in 2003. I was a huge fan of the original film. It was actually the first R-rated movie I ever saw. But when I went to the theater to see Matrix Reloaded, I hated it. I hated it when I first saw it. I was so disappointed in the theater. I was thinking, what have they done to this franchise? It came off cheesy on the first watch, and it was so disappointing. But it kind of stuck with me. When I left the theater, I kind of felt off, like I'd woken up from some kind of dream. And I wasn't sure what I had just watched. But when I woke up the next day, it's like my mind had been wrestling trying to understand the film on a philosophical level all night. And the next morning when I woke up, I was like, I think I liked that film. I think I might love that movie. I can't really explain it. There was one scene in particular that left a really strong impression on me. It was Neo's confrontation with the Architect. If you haven't seen the film, I'm totally going to spoil it, but that scene alone will warp your mind. Towards the end of the movie, Neo walks into this room and it's filled with TVs, and the Architect is somewhat of a representation of a god or a godlike figure. He's a program who's designed the Matrix. He's designed this world that everyone thinks they're living in. The Architect isn't quite like the Jewish or Christian God, the typical God that we think of in America. He's emotionally absent. So he tells Neo that he's not really a person. He's a program. He's designed to reboot the Matrix. That's his destiny. That's his purpose. He's actually relived this situation many times before. Whether or not he's going to follow his expected destiny and reboot the Matrix, or do something different against his programming. In this room, Neo faces that same critical choice again. There's two doors Neo can walk through. If he chooses the first door, he can reboot the Matrix like he's supposed to. If he chooses the second door, well, nobody knows what's going to happen. It could be chaos. It could be great, but he could risk everything. Things are further complicated because the woman he loves, named Trinity, is dying. Will he choose the first door to reboot the Matrix, or will he choose door 2, which would give him a chance to save Trinity and potentially stop the cycle that the world's been reliving over and over again? The second door could mean many different things to many different people, but to me personally, it represented choosing our own destiny, choosing who we're going to be despite what society or other people tell us we're supposed to be. When I wrote the song, that scene described what I was going through in my life. Several years later, I rewatched the film at home. It was 2008. I was a junior in college, and I was kind of going through a career crisis. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Actually, I did. It just felt like society was telling me that I couldn't do that. I wanted to be a musician. That was my passion. I went through this huge internal battle of whether or not I should major in music in college, or whether or not I should do something more lucrative or financially stable. I wanted to be a songwriter, but I kept getting nervous because it felt like society tells you that you can't do that and you must have a backup plan. So I would try other things like business school, education, psychology, sociology, but I kept circling back to music. So there I was watching The Matrix Reloaded, and for me, that second door was music. It was risky to choose music as a career and go through that door. It might risk financial stability. And it was also causing relationship problems in my dating life. Some of the girls I dated would beg me not to pursue music as a career because they called it a high school dream. I grew up in a middle-class suburban lifestyle, and it seemed like no girl's parent wanted their daughter to date a musician. Multiple times, families of the girls I dated would intervene, and they'd tell them that they needed to break up with me because they should date a doctor or a scientist because they would be able to provide in ways that I never could. Because if you stay with him, you'll never have those things. So this cycle went on for about 8 years, and I kept running into this type of situation with girls, and it just kind of jacked up my self-worth for a while. So it made me feel like if I chose music, I was really choosing to be alone. Now that I'm older, I've got a different perspective. But at that time, I thought these two things that I wanted most in life, a family and a career, could not coexist. My life experience was screaming at me that both of those things could not exist behind the same door. It felt like society had kind of outlined this set path that I was supposed to walk, and I was trying to break away from it. So when I rewatched that scene in The Matrix Reloaded, I felt like I stood in Neo's shoes. The difference was that if I chose the second door and decided to go all in as a musician, take the riskier choice, I felt like I was risking losing love. When the movie ended and the credits started rolling, I picked up my guitar immediately in the living room, and this song just kind of came out with no conscious effort. I was angry at the structure of society that I was living in, feeling like it was trying to control the destiny of my life, the direction. Subtle pressures pushing me towards becoming something that I didn't really want to be. Somewhere around that time, I decided I was going to change my college major back to music. I knew I was leaving myself without a career backup plan, kind of like walking through that second door and you don't know if the floor is going to fall out from under you or not. But I felt like music was my gift. That's something I'd been given, not just for me to enjoy, but to share with other people. It was part of who I am. So I decided to walk through that door, and not the door I felt so much pressure to walk through. Like all of the songs that I recorded The Architect at home by myself. I always lay down like a temporary scratch guitar track, and then I record drums. Then I go back and I delete that initial guitar track recording, and I re-record the guitar with a more polished take. Then the bass and the vocals come in. When I finished this song, Spotify wasn't really a big thing at the time. Music streaming services had not really taken off yet. So I was mostly just selling hard copies of the album on CD at shows. It appeared on an album called The Escape. It was my very first solo album, at least my first solo album that I was actually proud enough to give out to people. Other people really seemed to like this song. For them, it was one of the standouts on that first album of mine, but for me, I just felt like it was one of the more basic songs. It wasn't as musically interesting because I was very focused on trying to take listeners to new places in rock, and this song felt like it was something that came from the early 2000s. It just felt a little dated to me. But other people liked it, and that kind of perplexed me and made me think, maybe I'm not a good judge of what's a good single. Maybe I should listen to the crowd here. As I started to release my songs on streaming services, this song sat on the shelf for years. In 2022, I wanted to release a single every 2 months to kind of maintain some of the momentum that I had accumulated on streaming services as an artist. But late in the year, I was having tonsil surgery and I couldn't sing for a few weeks, so I couldn't finish a new song. I decided to revisit my back catalog, and I realized, maybe people were right about The Architect. Maybe I can polish the song to make it a little bit more current. I noticed it had a really catchy vocal melody, and the lyrics on the chorus were really strong. And that kind of ignited something in my gut when I listened to it, and I thought, okay, maybe I should do something with this track. When I revisited this song, I had been in a different place as a songwriter. I had started exploring writing background music for film and TV, so I was kind of working with some cinematic elements like strings and orchestra, and I thought maybe a good way to update this song would be to bring in some of those cinematic elements and put them in the song, so people felt more like they were watching a film, and maybe you could hear a little bit of the film's influence on this song. I also felt like I'd become a better guitarist, so I redid most of the lead guitar, and I added a more complex solo to the end of the song to just really pack in a bigger punch. When I originally recorded this song, I didn't have any training. I just set up some mics and I kind of started doing my thing, experimenting, trying to just gain some experience. But some of the mics were peaking out and they caused distortion on the vocal and drum takes. So when I remixed the song in 2022, I had to find ways to try to minimize that distortion. You can still hear it in some places, but I didn't want to lose the original vocal take because despite those problems, you could really hear the pressures and the frustrations that I was feeling at the time in the original vocal take. And I didn't want to lose that.
And we do what we're meant to do. And you know as you watch your heart just wither and die. I'll defy them all.
By the time I was finished revamping the song, it had transformed. I felt like it sped forward like a whole decade at least. When people listen to this song, I hope they can hear this dilemma and they can think about, who do you want to be? Are you the person that you want to be? Are you doing what you want to do with your life? Or are you doing it because you think this is the door that you are supposed to walk through? Are the pressures of society and the norms and the things everybody else done, is that what's dictating your life? Or are you someone else? Should you walk through that second door? The floor might fall out, but the deeper meaning is sometimes behind door number 2.
And you'll hope we don't meet again. Can now take the second door and